It was just another typical day. Or at least, that's what I thought. I came home early, thinking I'd surprise Jessica. The house was quiet, too quiet. Normally, I'd hear the sounds of her voice or the TV playing in the background. But today, there was nothing. Just silence. I called out her name, Jess. No response. A shiver ran down my spine, and something felt wrong. I walked into the living room, looking around for any signs of where she might be. My eyes scanned the room, and then I heard it. Laughter. Not just one person, but two. It was soft, casual, almost as if they had no idea I was standing just on the other side of the door. I froze. My heart started pounding in my chest. The laughter wasn't just friendly, it was intimate. A deep laugh, the kind shared between people who know each other too well, who feel comfortable in each other's company. I felt the blood rush to my ears as I moved toward the bedroom, each step feeling like an eternity. Something told me I wasn't going to like what I was about to see. I pushed open the door, and there they were, Jessica and a man, sitting together on the bed, laughing, like nothing in the world mattered, like I didn't exist. The sight hit me like a punch to the stomach. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred for a second, but the reality of what I was seeing finally sunk in. There they were, my wife and another man, their bodies close, their eyes locked in a way that made my blood run cold. This wasn't just a friendly conversation. This wasn't some innocent get-together. The man, Mark, as I later learned, wasn't some random friend either. I recognized him. He worked with Jessica, but that wasn't what hurt the most. It wasn't even that they were sitting so close, laughing together like they were the only two people in the world. It was the way she looked at him, the way she leaned in when he spoke, the way she responded with that smile I hadn't seen in months. The look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just a slip-up. This was betrayal. I stood there, frozen. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, to shout, but I couldn't. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving me numb and paralyzed. My chest felt tight, and I struggled to breathe. That's when Jessica finally saw me. The blood drained from her face, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. The kind of fear that comes when you know you've been caught, when you know there's no way out. "James," she stammered, her voice weak. "It's not what you think." I couldn't believe my ears. The same line, the same excuse I had heard from her before, but never like this. It was the kind of thing you say when you're caught in the act, when you know you have no way out but to lie. But I couldn't even process her words. My mind was racing, but it couldn't catch up with the situation. I took a step back, my head spinning. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice sharp, but it was like a distant echo, far away from the chaos in my chest. The man, Mark, looked at me, eyes wide, as if he was already trying to make his exit. He got up quickly, his hands shaking as he reached for his jacket. "I'm sorry, man," he said, almost too calmly. "I didn't mean to. Get out." I snapped, my throat tight. "Now." He didn't hesitate. Without another word, he bolted for the door, leaving me alone with Jessica. The door slammed shut behind him, and the silence that followed was deafening. I turned back to her. My heart was pounding in my chest, but now all I could feel was the rage, the betrayal, the hurt. "You've been lying to me," I said quietly, though my voice felt like it could break. "For how long, Jessica? How long has this been going on?" Her eyes filled with tears, but there was something else there, something I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just guilt, it was something colder, something distant. She didn't seem sorry, not like she should have been. Instead, it was almost like she was trying to rationalize everything. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, her voice trembling. "It's just been complicated. Mark and we've been spending a lot of time together at work, and it just happened. It wasn't planned." "Complicated?" I repeated, feeling a sick laugh rising in my throat. "You're telling me this just happened?" I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. How could she stand there and say this to me? After everything we had been through, after everything we had built, how long had she been hiding this from me? How many lies had I been fed? "No more lies, Jessica," I said firmly. "I can't believe a word you say anymore. I've had enough." Her face crumpled as she reached out to me. "James, please. Please don't do this. I'm so sorry." Sorry? Sorry didn't fix this. Sorry didn't change the fact that the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with everything, had been with another man in our bed, in our life. "I can't believe you," I said quietly, backing away from her. I didn't know what else to say. What else was there to say? She had made her choice. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I love you, James. I do. I never wanted to hurt you." But it was too late. The words had no power anymore. Nothing she said could undo what had already been done. The trust, the foundation of everything, was shattered. And I wasn't sure how, or if, I could ever put it back together. I turned my back on her, my heart breaking, but I knew it was the end. This was the point of no return. I didn't want to hear her apologies anymore. I didn't want to listen to her excuses, her justifications. They were nothing but empty words, meant to cover up the truth. The truth was that Jessica, my wife, had been betraying me for who knows how long, and it wasn't just a one-time mistake. No, this was a pattern, a betrayal of the worst kind, one that shattered every single thing I thought I knew about her. I left her standing in the living room, tears streaming down her face as I walked into the kitchen. My hands were shaking. My chest felt like it was going to explode. I needed to do something, anything, to take control of the situation. I wasn't sure what was worse, the shock of what I had just witnessed, or the sickening realization that the woman I had loved and trusted had been playing me for a fool. I reached for the bottle of whiskey in the cabinet, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to leave, to just grab my things and walk out the door, to never look back. But then another part of me, the part that still clung to the memories of our good times, told me to stay, to listen to her side of the story. But as I poured myself a glass, I realized there was nothing left to listen to. I already knew everything I needed to know. Jessica's actions spoke louder than any words she could say. I had seen it with my own eyes. The trust had been broken, and it wasn't something that could be repaired with a few apologetic words. The house felt so empty, so quiet. The life I had known for years seemed to be slipping away, piece by piece, as I stood there in the kitchen, trying to make sense of it all. But there was no making sense of this. There was no coming back from it. I heard her footsteps approaching, slowly, tentatively. She had probably realized by now that she had lost me. I didn't know if I could go back to her, even if I wanted to. The thought of touching her, holding her, after what had just happened, it felt wrong. Like everything we had built together had been a lie. "James," Jessica called out softly from the doorway. "Please, let's talk. I don't want to lose you." I didn't respond at first. I couldn't. My anger was still boiling inside me, but at the same time, I felt numb. I didn't know how to process everything that had happened in the last hour. The betrayal, the lies, the shock. My mind was reeling. She stepped into the kitchen and stood a few feet away, her eyes pleading with me to understand. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. It was just a moment of weakness, James." A moment of weakness? That's what she was going with. After everything? After the way she had been looking at Mark, touching him, laughing with him as if he were the one she had been married to? That was a moment of weakness? I slammed my glass down on the counter, the sound echoing in the silence of the house. A moment of weakness. I spat, my voice rising. "Are you kidding me? That wasn't a moment of weakness, Jessica. That was you choosing him over me. That was you deciding that whatever we had wasn't enough. That was you betraying me in the worst way possible." Her eyes welled up with tears again, and she took a step closer, but I backed away. "I never meant to hurt you, James," she said softly, but the hurt in her voice didn't feel sincere. It felt hollow, empty, like she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear. I wasn't buying it anymore. "Then why?" I demanded. "Why did you do it? Why him? Why now?" She didn't have an answer. Of course, she didn't. There was no good answer. No justification that could make me forget the way I had just seen them together, the way she had looked at him with such longing, with such familiarity. She didn't owe me a simple explanation. She owed me the truth, the whole truth. And for the first time in my life, I realized that the woman standing in front of me wasn't capable of giving me that. I watched her as she stood there, her shoulders hunched, her eyes downcast. She looked broken, but I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. Not after everything. My mind flicked back to Mark, the man who had been sitting next to her in our bed. My mind burned with the question. Had this been going on for months? Years? How long had she been hiding it from me? How long? I asked, the words coming out hoarse. How long has this been going on? She bit her lip, avoiding my gaze. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. But then, her voice barely a whisper, she admitted it. A few months. It was only supposed to be casual. Just a fling. Casual? A fling? The words hit me like a slap across the face. I didn't know what was worse, the fact that she had been seeing another man, or the fact that she had the audacity to call it casual. A fling. Something so easy to discard, so easy to justify. As if it meant nothing. I laughed bitterly. Casual? That's what this is to you? That's what our marriage meant to you? My voice cracked with the rawness of my emotions, but I couldn't hold back anymore. I'm sorry, James, she whispered. I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt you like this. I shook my head, stepping back. I couldn't look at her anymore. I didn't want to. It's too late for sorry, Jessica. You've crossed a line that you can't come back from. I can't go back to the way things were. She reached for my arm, but I pulled away, my anger flaring up once again. I didn't want to touch her. I didn't want her near me. The woman who had promised to love me, to stand by me, had broken that promise in the worst way possible. I want you to leave, I said, my voice cold. I need space. I need time to think. And when I do, I'll figure out what to do next. Her face crumpled at the words, and she nodded silently, turning to leave the room. I watched her walk away, and as she left, the weight of the decision settled heavily on my chest. I had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The door clicked shut behind her, and the sound echoed in the empty house. I stood there for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. It was like my world had shifted beneath me, and I was left standing on shaky ground, struggling to find solid footing. I had trusted Jessica completely. She was my partner, my wife, the person I thought I would grow old with. But everything had changed in an instant. Everything had unraveled in the blink of an eye. I wandered through the house, aimlessly at first, before finding myself in the living room. The familiar sights, the photos of our trips together, the furniture we had picked out, the little mementos we had collected over the years, now seemed foreign to me. They didn't feel like part of my life anymore. It was as if someone had taken a knife and sliced away at the fabric of everything I had known, and I was left staring at the jagged edges, unsure of how to make it whole again. I collapsed onto the couch, my mind swirling with thoughts. The betrayal was overwhelming. I could still see the image of Jessica and Mark sitting together in our bedroom, laughing as if they hadn't just destroyed everything. That look between them, that familiarity, it was like a slap to my face. How long had it been going on? How many times had she been with him behind my back? The questions buzzed in my mind, but every time I tried to answer them, the pain became unbearable. It was like every answer only added more weight to the burden I was carrying. I reached for my phone, my hands trembling, but I wasn't sure what I was looking for. A distraction, maybe, a way to avoid facing the reality of what had just happened. I scrolled through social media mindlessly, seeing everyone else's perfect lives. The families, the smiling couples, the photos that seemed so distant from the chaos that had just exploded in my life. But then my phone buzzed. A message. I didn't recognize the number, but I opened it anyway. I'm sorry, James. I never wanted any of this to happen. I made a huge mistake. Please, let's talk. I'll do anything to fix this. It was Jessica. I stared at the message, the words swimming before my eyes. What did she want now? What more could she say? She had already apologized 1,000 times, but it didn't change anything. It didn't change the fact that she had betrayed me, that she had been sleeping with another man, that she had lied to me over and over again. I slammed the phone down onto the coffee table. It felt like the only way to get the frustration out. The anger was bubbling up inside me again. I wanted to yell, to scream, to throw something. But there was no one to yell at, no one to blame, but Jessica. I had been betrayed by the one person I had trusted with everything, and now all I could do was sit here, alone, and try to make sense of it all. I didn't know how long I sat there, but eventually the quiet became too much. I stood up, pacing back and forth in the living room, my mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. Should I confront her again? Should I leave? I didn't even know if I wanted to be in the same house as her anymore. The trust had been shattered. The love we once had felt like a distant memory. But what did that mean for me? What did it mean for my future? I had always imagined a life with Jessica. We had talked about growing old together, about building a family. But now all of that seemed impossible. How could I ever look at her the same way again? How could I ever trust her again? I grabbed my jacket and headed outside. I needed air. I needed to clear my head to figure out what I was supposed to do. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, and for the first time in hours, I could breathe. But it didn't help. Nothing helped. I could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on me with every step I took. The world was still moving, still spinning, but I felt like I was stuck in a place where time had frozen. I didn't know how long I walked, but eventually I ended up at a bar. It wasn't my usual spot, but I didn't care. I just needed to be around people to drown out the thoughts racing in my head. I sat at the bar, ordered a drink, and tried to focus on something. Anything other than the mess that was my life. The bartender didn't ask any questions. He just poured the drink and left me to my own thoughts. I didn't know if I wanted to forget what had happened or if I wanted to find answers. I didn't know if I was ready to talk about it or if I was just too angry to even try. I sat there for hours, nursing my drink and staring into the glass. The anger had started to fade, replaced by something else, emptiness. How could I have not seen it coming? How had I let this happen? The doubts crept in, the insecurities. Had I done something wrong? Had I not been enough for her? My phone buzzed again. Another message from Jessica. Please, James. I love you. I need you. I can't lose you. Let's fix this. I stared at the message, my heart pounding in my chest. Part of me wanted to respond, to tell her everything I was feeling, to let her know how much she had hurt me, how much I needed her to understand what she had done. But I knew it wouldn't help. She had already made her choice. She had already broken my heart. I left the bar in a daze, not sure of where I was going or what I was doing. My mind was too clouded with confusion, anger, and sadness to think clearly. The walk home felt like an eternity. Every step I took felt like it was taking me farther away from the life I had known. When I got back to the house, the lights were still on. Jessica was probably waiting for me, hoping for some kind of reconciliation. But how could I reconcile with someone who had broken me so completely? How could I look at her the same way again? I walked inside, my footsteps heavy as I made my way through the quiet house. Everything felt wrong. Every corner, every room was a reminder of the life we had built together. But that life was gone now, and I didn't know if I could ever get it back. I woke up the next morning with a heavy sense of dread hanging over me. I had barely slept, my mind churning with everything that had happened the night before. The confrontation, Jessica's tearful apologies, the betrayal, the way she had looked at me when I walked in. Everything felt like it was replaying in my mind on a never-ending loop. My stomach twisted as I stared at the ceiling, unable to shut out the images of her and Mark. She was still here, in the house. I could feel her presence lingering in every room, even as I lay there, frozen in the bed we had shared for so many years. I wasn't sure what to do anymore. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave, to walk out of my life for good. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, still cared for her, wanted to find some way to fix this. But deep down, I knew it was beyond repair. She had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. The trust was shattered, and no amount of apologies or promises would bring it back. I forced myself out of bed, needing to do something, anything to distract myself from the chaos in my mind. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through the messages I had received the night before, still full of her desperate pleas for me to talk to her, to listen to her side of the story. I had ignored most of them, but now I found myself staring at her words, feeling a pit form in my stomach. Please, James, we can fix this. I love you. I never meant to hurt you. I was weak, but I'll make it right. I'll do whatever it takes to make you trust me again. I could almost hear her voice, the way she said those words, pleading with me. But the more I read them, the more hollow they sounded. They weren't the words of someone who truly understood the gravity of what they had done. They were words meant to soothe, meant to manipulate, meant to make me forget the truth. But I couldn't forget. I couldn't unsee what I had witnessed. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't just sit here and let this linger. I had to confront her again, face the reality of what had happened. I needed to know the truth. No more lies, no more half-truths. I had to hear it from her mouth. I found Jessica in the kitchen, sitting at the table, her face buried in her hands. She looked so different now. The woman I had known for so long was gone, replaced by someone unrecognizable. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hair was disheveled, as if she hadn't even bothered to fix herself up. But even in her apparent vulnerability, I could see the guilt in her eyes, the realization that she had lost everything. "James," she said softly, her voice cracking when she saw me standing in the doorway. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make this right." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words I wanted to say were stuck in my throat. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she had hurt me, but I had to control myself. I had to get the answers I needed, no matter how painful it would be. "You don't get it, do you?" I finally said, my voice cold. "You don't understand what you've done." She shook her head, her eyes wide with disbelief. "No, James, I do understand. I know I've messed up, but please, let me explain." I didn't let her continue. I wasn't interested in her explanations anymore. I needed the truth, and I needed it now. "How long, Jessica?" I asked, my voice low but firm. "How long has this been going on?" Her face fell, and she looked away, unable to meet my gaze. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I could feel the tension building, each second that passed feeling like an eternity. "A few months," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It started when we started drifting apart. I didn't know how to handle it, and Mark was there. He listened to me, James. He made me feel like I mattered. So that's it." I asked, my voice rising. "You just went to him for comfort? You didn't think about me? About what we had?" She didn't answer right away, but I saw the guilt in her eyes, the shame. I knew she had been looking for excuses, but there were no good excuses. Nothing could make what she had done right. "I wasn't thinking, James," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I was confused. I thought I needed someone to talk to, but it went too far. I regret it so much. I wish I could take it all back." The words fell flat. I didn't want to hear them anymore. Regret? Was that supposed to make everything okay? Was that supposed to heal the wound she had torn into the fabric of our lives? No, nothing could fix this. Nothing could change the fact that she had chosen someone else over me. "I don't think you do regret it," I said, shaking my head. "You're only sorry because you got caught. If I hadn't walked in on you and Mark, would you have ever told me the truth? Would you have ever come clean?" Jessica's eyes filled with tears again, but I wasn't moved by them. "Not anymore. I'm sorry, I swear. I didn't want this. I never wanted to hurt you, James." "Then why did you do it?" I asked, the frustration in my voice growing. "Why? You had me. You had everything. But you threw it all away for him. Was he worth it?" She didn't answer right away. The silence between us was deafening. I could feel the walls closing in, the weight of everything crushing me. She had no excuses, no way to justify her actions. She had made her choice, and now I had to live with the consequences. "I didn't mean for it to happen, James," she said softly. "It was a mistake. Please don't leave me." "I don't know if I can stay," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I can forgive you." The room seemed to spin as I said those words. I didn't want to say them, but they were the truth. How could I forgive her? How could I ever trust her again after what she had done? "I love you, James," Jessica pleaded, taking a step toward me. "Please don't leave me. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I swear, I'll never hurt you again." But it was too late for promises. Too late for apologies. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there, crying. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. All I knew was that my life had been turned upside down, and I didn't know how to put the pieces back together. The days after that confrontation passed in a blur. Each morning I woke up, staring at the ceiling, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me. I had never imagined I'd be here, sitting in this house, surrounded by the echoes of a life that no longer made sense. Jessica's apologies had become a constant hum in the background of everything I did, but they meant nothing. They were words without substance. The hurt was too deep, and no amount of talking could erase the images in my mind of her with him. I was living in a fog. I couldn't escape the suffocating weight of the situation. Every room in the house felt like a trap. The walls were closing in. The kitchen, where we used to share our meals, the living room, where we would sit and laugh together. Now all of it felt foreign. It was like the house itself had become a museum of what could have been a memorial to a life I had lost. Jessica had tried everything to win me back. She sent text messages, left voicemails, even came to me with gifts, small gestures that meant nothing to me. But nothing she did could change what had happened. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She had made her choice, and the reality of it was slowly settling in. Mark was no longer just a mistake, a one-time blip on the radar of our relationship. He was the symbol of everything that had gone wrong, the embodiment of Jessica's disregard for me and everything we had built together. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the questioning, the wondering if I had missed the signs, the feeling that somehow I had been blind to it all. How could I have not seen it? How could I have let her slip away from me like that? We had been together for years, and now it seemed like everything had been a lie. I spent hours pacing through the house, my mind racing in a million directions. I thought about the future, about what I wanted, but I kept coming back to one question. Could I ever forgive her? Could I ever look at Jessica the same way again? The love I had for her had been real. It had been everything to me, but it was shattered now, and I wasn't sure how to pick up the pieces. By the third day after our confrontation, I knew I couldn't continue living like this. The tension in the house was unbearable. I had to make a decision. I had to decide whether I would walk away and start over, or whether I would try to salvage something from the wreckage of our relationship. I'd already made up my mind, but the thought of leaving was terrifying. The thought of moving on from the woman I had married, the woman I had shared my life with. It felt like tearing away a part of myself. I decided to confront her again. This time, I needed to hear the truth. No more excuses. No more half-truths. I needed her to admit, once and for all, that she had made her choice and that it wasn't me. That she had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I found her sitting in the living room, her hands nervously twisting in her lap. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with that familiar mix of guilt and desperation. But there was something else there now, something that seemed to have changed in her. Maybe she had finally realized that her words wouldn't fix this, that the damage had been done. "James," she whispered, her voice shaky. "Please don't do this. I know I've hurt you. I know I betrayed you. But I'm begging you to listen. I never wanted this. I never meant to fall for him." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. I wasn't going to let her try to convince me that everything could go back to normal. Because it couldn't. Not anymore. "I've listened to you for days, Jessica," I said, my voice low but firm. "And it's the same thing every time. You're sorry. You never meant for it to happen. But I'm done with the excuses. I'm done with the lies. I need you to be honest with me, for once." She looked up at me, her eyes wide, as if she didn't expect me to be so blunt. "I am being honest," she said, her voice pleading. "James, I love you. I made a mistake. It was a moment of weakness. I didn't know how to handle everything falling apart between us." "Stop," I said, holding up my hand. "I don't need you to tell me it was a mistake. I don't need your excuses. I need to know something, Jessica. I need to know if you ever truly loved me. Because if you did, none of this would have happened." Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved by them anymore. I had cried enough. I had spent enough time wallowing in my own heartbreak. Now it was time for clarity. I had to know if there was any chance for us, or if it was truly over. "I do love you, James," she said quietly, the sincerity in her voice almost convincing. "I do. I never wanted to hurt you. But I got lost. I let myself get caught up in something that I thought would make me feel better. I thought I could make it work, but I was wrong. I've ruined everything. And I know it." I stood there processing her words. Her words were exactly what I had wanted to hear, but they didn't make the pain go away. They didn't fix the betrayal. They didn't change the fact that she had let someone else into our lives, into our marriage, and had chosen him over me. "I can't forgive you for this, Jessica," I said, my voice breaking with the weight of the words. "I can't look at you the same way. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. She looked at me, her face crumpled in grief, but I didn't feel sympathy for her anymore. The woman who had once been my partner was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. "I think it's time for us to move on," I said quietly. "We've both made mistakes, but this is something I can't come back from." The finality of it hit me hard. I had just let go of the only life I had known, the only person I had ever thought would be by my side forever. But I couldn't stay in a relationship built on lies. I couldn't keep pretending that everything would be okay when it never would be. Jessica's face fell as she heard the words. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She just sat there, her hands trembling in her lap. I didn't wait for her to say anything more. I turned and walked away, leaving the past behind. The house felt emptier with each passing day. Jessica's things were still here, her clothes, her books, the trinkets we had accumulated over the years. It all felt like a cruel reminder of what we had lost. I was drowning in the memories in the life we had built, but that life no longer felt real. It was like everything had been wiped away in an instant. The foundation of our marriage had crumbled, and no amount of cleaning, no amount of time, could ever make it feel whole again. I tried to stay busy. I threw myself into work, into everything I could to keep my mind from spiraling out of control. But no matter what I did, Jessica was always there, lurking in the background of my thoughts. Her voice, her face, the sound of her apologizing over and over again, it all haunted me. But I couldn't let myself fall back into her web of lies. I couldn't allow myself to be manipulated anymore. And yet, despite everything, I still felt that nagging pull. The part of me that wanted to believe in her, that wanted to believe that things could go back to normal if I just gave her one more chance. But deep down, I knew I was only fooling myself. The damage had been done. Trust, once broken, was not something you could easily fix. It wasn't something that could be patched up with a few sorry words and promises to do better. It took years to build trust, and it only took seconds to destroy it. I had made the decision to move on, to walk away. But every time I tried to let go, I found myself pulled back in like a magnet. I would remember the good times, the way she used to smile when I came home, the late-night talks we'd have about our future, the plans we had made together. But those were just memories now, just fragments of a life that no longer existed. One evening, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at the empty space around me. The silence was deafening. Jessica had gone to stay with her sister for a few days, and the house was so still that it felt like the walls were closing in on me. I had always thought that silence was peaceful, but now it was suffocating. It was a reminder of how empty everything had become. I picked up my phone and stared at the screen. There was a message from Jessica. She had sent dozens since that day, each one more desperate than the last. But this one was different. This one was the hardest to ignore. "I can't do this anymore, James. I can't live with myself knowing what I've done to you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to understand how much I regret it. I need you to know that I am truly sorry. I love you more than anything, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you if you'll let me. Please, just give me a chance to show you how sorry I am." The words stung. They were exactly what I had heard from her before. The same promises, the same apologies. But this time, they didn't move me. I didn't feel anything. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew it was too late. She had made her choice. She had chosen Mark over me, and no amount of guilt or remorse could take that back. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I threw my phone down on the coffee table, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on me again. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to give her another chance. But another part of me, one that had grown stronger over the past few days, knew that this was the end. There was no going back. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to shake off the lingering doubts. Every part of me wanted to just pick up the phone, to call her, to ask her to come back. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I had to stay strong. I had to stay true to myself. If I gave in now, I would be doing it for all the wrong reasons. I would be doing it because I was scared of being alone, because I didn't want to face the reality that everything had fallen apart. But that wasn't the reason I needed to stay away. I needed to stay away because I knew that if I allowed myself to be sucked back in, I would just be setting myself up for more pain, more disappointment. I had to move on. But how? How do you move on when everything you've known, everything you've loved, is suddenly gone? How do you rebuild when the foundation of your life has been destroyed? I didn't have the answers. I didn't know how to fix this, how to make sense of everything. But I knew that I couldn't stay in the past anymore. I couldn't keep letting the memories of her haunt me. I had to let go. The next day, I packed up some of my things, clothes, personal items, and moved them into a storage unit. It felt surreal, like I was packing up someone else's life. But it was my life, my future, and I had to take control of it. I couldn't keep waiting for something to change. I couldn't keep living in this house, in this place of constant reminders of everything I had lost. When Jessica came back that evening, the house was empty. I had left a note on the kitchen counter. It was simple, but it said everything I needed to say. I need space. I need time. I can't do this anymore. It wasn't easy. Watching her break down, watching her realize that I wasn't coming back, it tore me apart. But I couldn't back down. I couldn't give her false hope. The decision had been made, and I had to stick with it. I drove away from the house that night, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that I was finally taking control of my life, but sadness because of everything we had lost. I couldn't pretend that it didn't hurt. It hurt more than anything I had ever felt. But I knew that this was the only way forward, the only way to heal. The days following my decision to leave felt like a strange blur. There was a quiet emptiness that hung over everything I did. I had moved out of the house, but it didn't feel like I was escaping anything. It felt like I was walking into an unknown future, a future that didn't include Jessica, a future I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I stayed with a friend for the first week. It was a place to breathe, a place where I didn't have to face the wreckage I'd left behind. But the calm only lasted so long. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. What was I doing? Was I making the right choice? Was there any hope left for me? Or was this the end of everything I'd worked so hard to build? I spent hours walking around the city, trying to distract myself. I found solace in the mundane things, going to the gym, grabbing coffee, running errands. But no matter what I did, I couldn't escape the constant stream of thoughts about Jessica and what had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the image of her with Mark, it all replayed over and over again in my mind. It was like an infinite loop I couldn't break free from. But then, slowly, something shifted. The more space I had from the situation, the clearer things became. I realized that I had been so focused on the past, on what had gone wrong, that I hadn't taken a moment to think about my future. I had been living in the shadow of Jessica's betrayal for too long, and it was time for me to take control of my own life again. I started focusing on myself. I reconnected with old friends, made time for activities I had once enjoyed but had neglected. I signed up for a class I had been wanting to take for years, something completely unrelated to anything I had done before. It was a small step, but it was a step toward reclaiming my independence. Slowly, the weight of the past began to lift, and I started to feel like myself again. I had spent so much time holding on to the hurt, holding on to the anger, but I realized that I needed to let go of it. Holding on to the pain was only holding me back. Jessica, of course, kept trying to reach me. She called, texted, and even showed up at my friend's house once, pleading with me to talk to her. But each time I stood firm. I had made my decision, and it wasn't about punishing her. It was about protecting myself, about learning to trust again. And as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't go back to the life I had before. That life no longer existed. The emotional roller coaster of the past few weeks left me drained, but it also left me with clarity. I didn't need to fix everything. I didn't need to figure out how to make Jessica love me again or how to fix her broken marriage. What I needed to do was figure out how to heal for myself. And that meant putting myself first for once, taking the time to grieve, and then moving forward with my life. One evening, I went out with an old friend of mine. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like I could just relax and enjoy myself. We went to a bar, grabbed a few drinks, and talked about everything. Life, relationships, where we were headed. My friend could see the change in me. The weight had been lifted. I wasn't perfect. I wasn't completely healed, but I was getting there. Slowly but surely, I was finding my way back. I had a moment of realization that night, sitting there with my friend. I didn't have to carry the burden of Jessica's betrayal with me anymore. It was a part of my past, yes, but it didn't define who I was or who I was going to be. I could still have a future, and it could be better than the life I had before. In the weeks that followed, I continued to make small changes. I set new goals for myself, both personally and professionally. I started a new project at work that I had been putting off for months. I reconnected with people I had lost touch with, and I made an effort to open up to new experiences. I was no longer looking over my shoulder, wondering if Jessica was going to come back into my life. I had stopped holding my breath, waiting for something that wasn't going to happen. And then, just when I thought I had finally moved on, Jessica reached out again. This time, it wasn't a message or a call. She showed up at my door, standing there in the rain, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "James, please," she said, her voice desperate. "I don't know what else to do. I need you. I'm sorry for everything. I've been to therapy. I've been trying to figure out how to fix myself. Please, just listen to me." I stood there, staring at her for a long moment. She looked broken, and a part of me felt sympathy for her. But that part was small. It was a shadow of what I had once felt for her. The love that had been there before was gone, replaced by something harder, something that couldn't be undone. "I've listened to you 1,000 times, Jessica," I said quietly, my voice steady. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep waiting for you to change. I've already changed. I've moved on." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't going to fall for it again. This wasn't the woman I had fallen in love with. The woman standing in front of me was someone who had betrayed me, someone who had broken the trust one had given her. And I realized, in that moment, that I didn't need her anymore. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said, turning away from her. "But I'm done." And I closed the door. As I stood there, my back to the door, I felt something shift inside of me. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even sadness. It was peace, a peace I hadn't known in so long. I had finally made the decision to move on, to stop letting the past dictate my future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. After closing the door behind Jessica, I stood there for a long time, just breathing. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't paralyzed by the weight of her betrayal. The tension in my chest loosened, and I felt the sting of everything that had happened begin to dull. I had let go. I had let go of the hope that things could go back to the way they were, and I had let go of the anger and resentment that had consumed me for months. I had walked away from something that no longer served me, and I was finally free to begin again. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. It was a cleansing, almost cathartic feeling. There was a quiet, reassuring sense of finality in the air. I had done what I needed to do. I had made my decision, and now I had to live with it one step at a time. The next few weeks were hard, but in a different way. I no longer felt the crushing pressure of making the right decision, of questioning whether I had done the right thing. What was hard now was adjusting to the reality that Jessica was no longer a part of my life, that the relationship I had invested so much in was over. It was like learning to breathe again after holding my breath for so long. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I moved into a new apartment, a smaller, more modest place, but it felt like a fresh start. The process of packing up my life, of leaving behind the house I had shared with Jessica, was emotional. I went through old photographs, old mementos, and I had to make a choice about what to keep and what to leave behind. In the end, I packed away the memories, kept a few things that still held meaning to me, but left the rest behind. The things that didn't serve me. The things that no longer had a place in my future. The apartment was quiet first, almost too quiet. But as the days went by, I began to appreciate the silence. It was my silence. It was a space where I didn't have to answer to anyone, where I didn't have to worry about someone's disappointment or someone's expectations. It was a place where I could simply be myself again, without the weight of a broken relationship dragging me down. I spent more time with friends, people who had been there for me during the worst of it, people who understood the pain I was going through and didn't judge me for it. We laughed, we talked, we spent hours over coffee or drinks, just enjoying the simplicity of being in good company. It felt good. It felt like I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been lost in the fog of the last few months. One night, a friend invited me to a concert. It was something spontaneous, something I never would have done before. I went, and for the first time in a long time, I let go. I let myself enjoy the music, the energy of the crowd, the way the lights danced in the air. It felt like a tiny victory, like a small reclaiming of my own happiness. As the weeks passed, the sadness became less intense, replaced by a quiet sense of strength. I started focusing on my own growth, on my own future. I knew I had a long road ahead of me, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was moving forward. I wasn't sure exactly where I was going, but I knew I was no longer stuck in the past. I was taking the necessary steps to heal. Work became a distraction, but in the best possible way. I threw myself into my career, setting new goals, taking on new projects. I had more energy, more motivation than I had in a long time. I wasn't doing it to fill the void left by Jessica. I was doing it because I wanted to. I was doing it because I could. The confidence I had lost during the breakup was slowly returning, and I was starting to feel like myself again. But even as I embraced the future, there were moments when the past would creep in. Moments when I would think about the life Jessica and I had shared, about the dreams we had built together. Those moments were harder now because I knew that those dreams were gone. And the worst part was knowing that I had been replaced. Not by someone else, necessarily, but by the reality that Jessica had made a choice to walk away from me, to choose something else over the life we had created. In those moments, I reminded myself that I wasn't the one who chose this. I wasn't the one who betrayed us. I had given my all to the relationship, to the marriage. I had trusted Jessica, and she had broken that trust. No matter how much it hurt, I had done the right thing by walking away. I had chosen to protect myself, to preserve my sense of self-worth. And now, I was moving forward. One afternoon, I received a message from Jessica again. This time, there was no pleading, no apologies, just a simple, quiet message. I hope you find happiness, James. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't know how to feel when I read it. Part of me felt a pang of sadness, but it wasn't as intense as it had been before. I had already made my peace with the situation. I had already said my goodbyes in my own way. And now, it was time to let go completely. I didn't respond to her message. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. The chapter of my life that had been defined by our relationship was over, and now it was time to write a new chapter, one that was entirely my own. The freedom of letting go was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I wasn't burdened by the weight of Jessica's mistakes or my own regrets anymore. I was free to be who I wanted to be. I was free to create my own future, a future that didn't include the shadow of betrayal. And as I looked ahead, I realized that while the past would always be a part of me, it no longer had control over me. I was no longer defined by what had happened. I was defined by what I chose to do next. I was choosing to heal, to grow, to move forward. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.